Good afternoon, class. Good afternoon, ma'am. This is our report about crime scene specific on trace biological evidence and identification collection preservation po.
Trace evidence may consist of debris such as dirt, soil, sand, gravel, grass, leaves, twigs, adhesive, and tape, fibers, glass, or bullet fragments. The trace evidence identifies and confers scientific types of trace materials that could be transferred during the commission of the violent crime. When the trace evidence is identified, the following steps in the collation of evidence outlined below. Document and photograph the evidence. Properly secure an evidence by placing in paper bag or envelope. Close, sew, or tape the paper bag or envelope. The examiner must initial date and time across the cell area. Label the bag or envelope with the patient identifying information. Examiner must place signature, date, and time on envelope. Document and photograph the evidence. An object or document is considered to be demonstrative evidence when it directly demonstrates a fact. The items of evidence must be properly sold with evidence tape, must initial date and time over evidence tape. The clearly mark with your agency, inventory number, and description. Make sure to use appropriate size packaging and proper labeling when applicable. Biological evidence may consist of blood, skin, hair, semen, saliva, and urine. The biological evidence consists of the body fluids or other bodily tissues, and examination of which may identify the donor. Swabs collected for biological evidence may include buccal, oral, skin, fingernail, bite marks, perineal, vaginal, cervical os, penile, scrotum, rectal. Hair collected is placed in an envelope. The same process of packaging, securing, and maintaining the evidence as outlined above is used for the collection of trace evidence. Swabs of stain. Types of specimen. Date secure. Crime scene investigator or investigator's initial, case name and number, and from where sample was taken. Evidence. Collect as such stain onto as few cotton swabs as possible. Use stain with distilled water. Packaging and storing biological evidence. The use of well-defined procedures for packaging, storing, and tracking can maintain biological evidence strategy for testing. The personnel involved in managing biological evidence often face challenges because of the size and location of the storage facility, supplies available for packaging, adequacy for packaging system and resources, and other issues. This section identifies current best practice to maintain evidence integrity from initial packaging to final disposition. Collection and presentation of evidence. The collection, preservation, and forensic analysis of the evidence with most crimes and often critical in determining a person's guilt or a person's innocence. The forensic exam is beneficial to law enforcement and the medical setting to provide a comprehensive medical forensic examination with the collection of Evidence: knowing the patient's body is the crime scene. Evidence must be identified, collected, packaged, secured, and maintained correctly. Then released to law enforcement following strict chain of custody rules so that it can be analyzed appropriately and used later in legal proceedings. The collection, preservation, and securing evidence is critical from the time it is collected. Completion of chain of custody documentation is also critical. The chain of custody must contain information about the evidence collected and must remain with the evidence until it is released to the law enforcement. The patient's identifying information with the date, time, law enforcement involved with the case number must be included. Each person who has had contact or possession of a piece of evidence must be identified on a chain of custody formed from the time it is collected and then released to the law enforcement. If the chain of custody documentation is complete, inaccurate, or omitted, it will cause the evidence to be inadmissible in a court of law.
Dito na po tayo sa collection and preservation of evidence. Marami pong klaseng collection of evidence na makukuha natin sa crime scene. So, dito tayo sa fingerprint. Fingerprints also include palm prints and barefoot prints are the best evidence to place an individual at the scene of a crime. Collecting fingerprints at a crime scene requires very few materials, making it ideal from a cost standpoint. All small transportable items should be packaged in paper bag or envelopes and sent to the crime scene lab for processing. So, sa fingerprints, napag-aralan naman natin to last sem kung paano pinoproseso o nakukuha ang mga fingerprints sa mga baso, tasa o sa mga object na nakita sa crime scene. Sumunod ang bite marks. Bite marks are found many times in sexual assault and can be matched back to the individual who did the biting, cause the photographs of the suspect teeth and maybe the victim's teeth will be needed for comparison. So, sa bite marks, dito rin ma-identify kung yung pagkagat pa ng taong yun ay nag-match dun sa ngipin nung biktima o nung suspect na pwedeng maging evidence. Halimbawa na lang sa biktima, siya yung hinahawakan na siya o hinahatak, hindi pinapersa na siya, ngunit nanlaban siya at nakagat niya yung suspect. Hindi na pinagpatuloy ng suspect yung masama niyang balak sa biktima at nakatakas. So, kung magkakaroon ng investigasyon, hahanapin doon yung kung sino ang may bite mark sa katawan o sa pinagkagatan ng biktima. Question documents. Handwriting samples can also be matched back to the individual that produced them. Known exemplars of the suspect's person's handwriting must be submitted for comparison to the unknown samples. Question documents can be processed for fingerprints. Sa question documents naman ay pwedeng may halimbawa dito yung mga check o mga cheque na babayaran sa bangko kung yung mga suspect ay persahang kinatok o persahang pinuntahan yung mabibiktima nila at papabayarin sa peking cheque na kanilang hawak o ginawa. Pwede rin yung mapunta sa investigasyon at ma-check kung legit ba yung cheque nila na bababayad o hindi. All items should be collected in paper containers. For more information, consult a question document examiner. Or pwede rin siguro yung mga fingerprints na nasa document or mga peking dokumento na pinapasa ng mga suspect para may makuha sila or may pagtatago sila sa kanilang identity. Sumunod ay paint. Paint can be said that it is the same type and color as paint found in the possession of a suspect. So, sa paint as evidence, collection of evidence, para rin siyang trace evidence na magbibigay ako ng halimbawa na yung nakabisikleta ay papunta sa trabaho niya at yung sasakyan ay mabilis ang takbo at nabangga niya yung bisikleta. Yung kulay nung bisikleta nung papasok sa trabaho ay tumatak dun sa sasakyan nung suspect at yung suspect ay dire-diretso lang sa kanyang paroroon at hindi niya hininto yung sasakyan niya para i-check yung nabiktima niya. So, magkakaroon ng investigation kung saan yung pintura nung bike nung biktima ay nasira at pwedeng kumapit yun sa sasakyan nung suspect. So, pwede siya maging trace evidence na hahanapin kung sino nakabunggo at kung may marks na paint yung sasakyan. Firearms and tool marks. Bullets and casings found at the crime scene can be positively matched back to a gun in a possession of a suspect. Bullets and casings can be also examined at the crime lab and sometimes tell an investigator what make and model of weapons may have expended the casing or bullets. A bullet found at the crime scene can sometimes be matched back to the same lot of ammunition found in a suspect possession. So, halimbawa na lang sa crime scene, may nagbarilan. Maalaga sa crime scene na yun na may makolek as evidence na basyo ng bala para makita kung ilang bala ang napaputok nila at kung anong klaseng kalibre ng baril ang ginamit. Kung may nakolek mang baril, pwede itong makita kung saan ginawa o nabili. Possible rin na may serial number yung baril na makita kung kanino nakapangalan yung baril na yun. So, tool marks can be positively matched to a tool in the suspect possession. So, pwede rin maging evidence yung tool marks na yun. Halimbawa na lang siguro sa tool marks naman sa krimen na ginawa ng suspect, pwede maging evidence yung tool marks na yun. Halimbawa sa pagwasak ng pinto gamit maso, ma-identify nila kung paano winasak yung pinto ng mga suspect. So, the firearms should be packaged in an envelope or paper bag separately from the ammunition and or magazine. The ammunition and or magazine should be placed in a paper envelope or bag. It is important that the ammunition found in the gun be submitted to the crime lab. Blood and body fluids. If using the RFLP, restriction fragment length polymorphism method of DNA analysis, then blood and seminal fluids can be matched back to an individual with a high degree of probability. So, sa blood and fluids, ito yung collection of evidence na ine-examine as DNA. Kung may matagpo ang blood sa crime scene, ma-identify nila kung kaninong dugo yun o pagkakakilanlan ng biktima. At kung may body fluids like semen sa part ng biktima, maaari itong ginahasa ng suspect or kung anumang nagawa. Marami namang klaseng ng body fluids katulad ng urine, sweat, etc. Ayun. So, ganun yung blood and body fluids as collection of evidence. Mapapag-aralan din natin itong topic sa susunod about DNA. So, if the stained object can be transported back to the crime lab, then package it in a paper bag or envelope and send it to the lab. If the object cannot be transported, then either use fingerprint fingerprint tape and leave it like a fingerprint and place the tape on a lip bag. Scrap the stain into a paper packet and package it in a paper envelope. Absorb the stain into 1/2 inch long thread moistened with distilled water. The threads must be air dried before permanently packaging. Fracture matches. Fracture matches can positively link broken pieces at the scene with pieces found in the possession of a suspect. For example, headlight fragments found at the scene of a hit-and-run could be positively matched to a broken headlight. Just like putting together a jigsaw puzzle on a suspect vehicle. Fracture matches, ito nga yung mga piraso na bagay sa krimen na kasama sa ginawa ng suspect. Halimbawa raw nito yung headlight fragment ng sasakyan kung saan nabunggo niya yung biktima. Pwedeng mag-match yung ibang parts na nasira doon sa sasakyan. Sabi nga, jigsaw puzzle na parang nawala yung piraso ng bagay na ginamit sa krimen. Larger fragments should be placed in paper bags or envelopes. Smaller fragments should be placed in a paper packet and then placed in an envelope. Glass. Glass can be said that it has the same characteristics as glass found in the possession of a suspect. Smaller glass fragments should be placed in a paper packet and then in an envelope. So yung glass daw po, glass evidence naman, ito yung evidence na nakukuha sa salamin o glass na para din siyang fracture matches na pagkabasag ng salamin o pwede rin makakuha rito ng body fluids or blood at fingerprint ng biktima o suspect. Larger pieces should be wrapped securely in paper or cardboard and then placed in an added cardboard box to prevent further breakage. Representative example from the suspect should be submitted on the lab for comparison. Broken fingernails. Much like a bullet that has individualizing striation on it, natural fingernails have individualizing striation on them. A broken fingernail found at the crime scene can be matched to the individual it came from many months after the crime has been committed. Broken fingernail, ito yung mga fingernail sa crime scene kung saan aksidente sigurong naputol ang fingernail ng suspect at pwede rin ito ma-identify kasi matagal din tumubo ang paghilom ng sugat sa kuko. Broken fingernails should be placed in a paper packet which is then placed in a paper envelope. It can then be transported to the crime lab for analysis. So, dito tayo naman sa shoe prints and tire tracks. Shoe prints and tire tracks can be matched positively to a pair of shoes or to a tire in a suspect possession. Shoe prints and tire tracks can sometimes tell investigators what type of shoes or tires to look for when searching a suspect residence or vehicle. Sa shoe prints naman, parang fingerprint din, kaso tracing din kung kaninong shoe yung nasa crime scene, yung pagbakas. Kung halimbawa, ginawa ang krimen sa damuhan o sa putikan o maulan, mabakas yung paa nung sapatos ng suspect. Ganon din sa tire tracks. Kasi minsan, or sa preno, bumabakas yung gulong sa semento at napupudpud yung gulong ng suspect na pwede matrace kung sinong may gulong na napupudpud o anong klaseng sasakyan ang ginamit sa krimen. Shoe prints on hard, flat surface can be also sometimes be lifted like a fingerprint. Dust prints on certain surfaces can be lifted with an electrostatic dust print lifter. Hair evidence, which are composed primarily of the protein keratin, can be defined as slender outgrowths of the skin of mammals. Each species of animals possesses hair with characteristic length, color, shape, root appearance, and internal microscopic features that distinguish one animal from another. Considerable variability also exists in the types of hairs that are found on the body of an animal. In humans, hairs can be found on the head, pubic region, arms, legs, and other body areas have characteristics that can determine their origin. On animals, hair types include coarse, outer hairs or guard hairs, the final four hairs, tactile hairs such as whiskers, and other hairs that originate from the tail and mane of the animal. So sa hair evidence, marami siyang klase, mapa-human or animals, at meron din parte ng katawan. Because hairs can be transferred during physical contact, their presence can associate a suspect to a victim or a suspect victim to a crime scene. The types of hair recovered and the condition and number of hairs found all impact on their value as evidence in criminal investigation. Comparison of the microscopic characteristic questioned hairs to known hair samples helps determine whether a transfer may have occurred. So sa hair evidence, sa crime scene, kung mayroon bang nagkaroon ng physical contact ang victim to suspect or suspect to victim, at kung may nakita silang buhok or hair sa part ng victim, ay pwede nilang imbestigahan yun at magagamit yung microscopic kung kaninong buhok ang nasa crime scene. Hair microscopy. The examination of human hairs in the forensic laboratory is typically conducted through the use of light microscopy. This examination routinely involves a two-step process: the identification of questioned hairs and the comparison of questioned and known hairs. The purpose for conducting this examination is to ascertain whether two or more individuals could have come into contact or whether one or more individuals could have come into contact with an object. This associative evidence is particularly useful in crimes of violence such as homicide, sexual assault, and aggravated assault where physical contact may have occurred. Crimes such as burglary and armed robbery typically involve the recovery of debris and articles of clothing which may contain hairs useful for the identification of suspect. So, sa microscopy po, ito po yung pag-examine ng mga object na bagay sa crime scene. Halimbawa na lang dito yung damit na may buhok na naiwan. Maaari pong nagpalit ng suspect ng damit at ayun yung pwedeng maging subject nila, yung damit. Pwede rin itong ma-identify sa panggagahasa kung ilang tao ang gumahasa dahil may physical contact na naganap dito, o di kaya sa robbery kung may naiwang sombrero na may buhok ng suspect sa crime scene, pwede nila ma-identify yon. Hair anatomy and growth. Hair is present on many different regions of the body. Each region, such as the head, pubic area, chest, axilla, and limbs, has hairs with microscopical characteristic attributable to that region. Although it is possible to identify a hair as originating from a particular body area, the regions of the body that are primarily used in forensic comparisons are the head and pubic areas, as hairs undergo a cyclical growth, anagen, and resting phase, telogen. The visible microscopic characteristics are sufficient to determine the phase of growth of the hair. So, sa hair anatomy and growth, ito po yung mga region ng hair sa katawan natin, tulad ng mga buhok, sa kilikili, sa katawan, sa kamay, at iba pa. Pero yung pinaka-common use talaga is yung buhok sa ulo. Animal hairs discovered on items of physical evidence can link a suspect or location to a crime of violence. A victim placed in a vehicle or held at a location where animals are routinely found often result in the transfer of animal hairs to the victim's clothing. Cat or dog hairs can be found on the adhesive portion of ransom and extortion notes prepared by pet owners. The transfer of pet hairs to the victim or crime scene may also occur when the suspect is a pet owner and has animal hairs on his or her clothing. When the contact occurs, this is referred to as secondary transfer of trace material. Ang halimbawa dito is kung yung suspect ay pet owner at may tumapo sa kanyang kamay na kaunting buhok dahil hinawakan niya yung alaga niya at humawak ng object yung suspect na nakapatay siya ng biktima at yung object na yun ay mayroong buhok ng animals na yun na nahawakan ng suspect owner, yung pet owner. Head hairs. Head hairs are usually the longest hairs on the human body. They are characterized as having a uniform diameter and often a cut tip. Head hairs can appear cut with tapered tips but are more often cut with scissors, razor, or clippers. In general, these hairs are subject to more alteration than hairs from other body areas. Alteration to the natural appearance of include use of hair dyes, rinses, permanents, frost, and other chemical application. Sa hairheads po, ito po yung laging ginagamit sa crime scene kung nasasapunot o sinunog ang buhok, ganun. At pwede rin ma-identify yung suspect kung kumapit yung buhok niya sa katawan ng biktima at kung ito ba yung buhok niya ay hair dyes, halimbawa may kulay yung buhok ng suspect at dumapo yung yun sa katawan ng biktima, pwede ma-identify yun or pwede rin nila ma-identify kung yung buhok ba ng suspect ay bagong gupit o yung gupit na maikli o mahaba, ganun po. Pubic hairs. Pubic hairs are also routinely compared in a forensic laboratory as with head hairs. Considerable variation exists between individuals in the population. Pubic hairs are not subject to as much change as head hairs over time, and because of this, a sample taken a year or more after a crime may still be suitable for many comparison purposes. It is recommended that a non-pubic hair sample be obtained as soon as possible after a crime and should be contained at least 25 full-length hairs taken from different areas of the pubic region. Pubic hairs, ito po yung buhok natin sa sigit natin at pwede po ito maging evidence na pag-aaralan ng forensic science. Sa halimbawa na lang kung may panggagahasang nangyari at pwedeng may natira o may pubic hairs dun sa katawan ng biktima, pwede na ma-identify yun kung kaninong galing kung pag ginamitan ng microscopy. Facial hairs. Facial hairs are more commonly called beard hairs or mustache hairs. These hairs are coarse in appearance and can have a triangular cross-section. Heavy shouldering or dots in the hair are observed under magnification. Other characteristics include a white medulla and a razor-cut tip. So sa facial hairs nga, ayan yung mga balbas natin, bigote. Possible rin siya na pwede maging evidence. Limb hairs. Hairs from the legs and arms constitute limb hairs. These hairs are shorter in length, arc-like in shape, and often abraded or tapered at the tips. The pigment in limb hair is generally granular similar in appearance, and the medulla is traced to discontinuous. So, ayun nga, yung buhok natin sa paa at sa arm daw, sa kamay. Fringe hairs. Hairs originating from areas of the body outside those specifically designated as head or pubic are generally not suitable for significant comparison purposes. These hairs might originate from the neck, sideburns, abdomen, upper leg, and back. So, yung fringe po, ito po yung tinatawag nating bangs. Yung parang lawit na nasa buhok natin. Yung po tinatawag natin fringe hairs. At ito po yung pinakalas sa ating hairs. Other body area hairs, axillary underarm hairs, chest hairs, eye hairs, and nose hairs are not routinely compared as with limb hairs and fringe hairs. Their presence may help to corroborate information obtained during an investigation. So, ayun, pwede rin maging evidence din possible yung mga buhok natin sa katawan, mga katulad ng mata o sa ilong, ganun po. Ito po yung the hair structure. Meron po siyang hair shaft, epidermis, melanoxy, sweat gland, dermis, blood vessels, subcutaneous fat, papilla of hair, hair follicle, arrector pili muscle, at sebaceous gland. Dito na po tayo sa fiber evidence. A fiber is the smallest unit of a textile material that has a length many times greater than its diameter. Fibers can occur naturally as plant and animal fibers, but they can also be man-made. A fiber can be spun with other fibers to form a yarn that can be woven or knitted to form a fabric. The type and length of fiber used, the type of spinning method, and the type of fabric construction all affects the transfer of fibers and the significance of fiber associations. This becomes very important when there is possibility of fiber transfer between a suspect and the victim during a commission of crime. Natural fibers. Many different natural fibers originating from plants and animals are used in the production of fabric. Cotton fibers are the plant fibers most commonly used in textile material. With the type of cotton, fiber length, and degree of twist contributing to the diversity of these fibers, processing techniques and coarse application also influence the value of cotton fiber identification. So, yung mga ibang natural fiber daw po ay galing sa plants or pwede rin sa animals at may kanya-kanyang uri po ng fiber. Man-made fibers. More than half of all fibers used in the production of textile materials are man-made. Some man-made fibers originate from natural materials such as cotton or wood. Others originate from synthetic materials. Polyester and nylon fibers are the most commonly encountered man-made fibers, followed by acrylics, crayons, and acetates. There are also many other less common man-made fibers. The amount of production of a particular man-made fiber and its end use influence the degree of rarity of a given fiber. Fiber color. Color influences the value given to a particular fiber in identification. Often several dyes are used to give a fiber a desired color. Individual fibers can be colored prior to being spun into yarns. Yarns can be dyed and fabrics made from them can be dyed. Color can also be applied to the surface of fabric, as found in the printed fabrics. How color is applied and absorbed along the length of the fibers are important comparison characteristics. Color fading and discoloration can also lend increased value to a fiber association. So, sa fiber color, yun nga, pwede din ma-identify yung suspect dahil sa suot niyang damit, dahil din sa suot niya na damit sa krimen, at ayun, may kita rin kung halimbawa may CCTV or sabis ng witness, ganito ang kulay niya, kulay pula, at ayun po, pwede pong ma-identify as evidence din po. Fiber number. The number of fibers on the clothing of a victim identified as matching the clothing of a suspect is important in determining actual contact. The greater the number of fibers, the more likely that contact actually occurred between these individuals. So, sa example ko ng fiber number is kung ilang beses silang nagkaroon ng physical contact sa isa't isa ng biktima at ng suspect. Halimbawa na lang is yung pagsasaksak ng suspect sa biktima, kung ilang beses siya nasaksak, ma-identify yun sa fiber clothing ng biktima. Fiber location. Where fibers are found also affects the value placed on the particular fiber association. The location of fibers on different areas of the body or on specific items at the crime scene influences the significance of the fiber association. So, sa example ko sa fiber location is yung katawan ng biktima is nasa carpet at naigalaw ito, pwedeng magkaroon ng bakas ng dugo dun sa carpet na unang fiber location. Ang pagkakaintindi ko dito, halimbawa ay mayroon carpet at nandun yung bangkay ng biktima na may bakas ng dugo, pwedeng may galaw yung biktima o nilipat ang bangkay niya, pwede niyang matrace kung saan nailipat yung katawan ng biktima. Ito po yung collection of fibers evidence. Fibers cling to other fibers and hair, but may be easily brushed off. When approaching a scene, investigator will attempt to pinpoint location for deposited fibers. For example, the carpeting under the surrounding a victim's body, clothing from the victim or a suspected weapon are likely places to find fibers. Common collection methods include individual fiber collection using tweezers or vacuuming an area and sorting the materials at the laboratory. Trace evidence can also be gathered by taping lifting. However, this is not ideal due to the destructive nature of adhesive. Samples that potentially contain fibers should not be separated bagged to prevent cross-contamination.